Neil, the jury came and said that they had verdicts on 8 of the 18 charges, and on count number 1, the jury has reached a unanimous decision that Paul Manafort is guilty of filing fake tax returns. I'm getting handed a sheet that has the word guilty on it 5 times. We got count 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 dealing with filing fake tax returns in 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, and 2014. And Paul Manafort has been found guilty by the jury on all 5 of those counts. It sounds like outside the court, there's just one person cheering. I couldn't tell what it was. So 5 of 8 so far are guilty for the Manafort team, and we expect to have the next few charges any minute. We also expect to find out what's going to happen, what the judge wants to do with these 10 charges that the jurors say they could not reach a unanimous decision on during their 4 days of deliberation. Neil?
All right, Peter, thank you very much. And again, just to sort this out, we are talking about Paul Manafort. This is in Alexandria, Virginia. This is a separate look at about the 18 counts that were originally facing him on this wave of prosecution against the former campaign manager for Donald Trump. And again, very, very early on in the process, but at least 5 guilty counts. Separately, the Michael Cohen situation in Manhattan, of course, the president's personal lawyer, who has pled guilty to campaign violations, financial fraud, all of which could land him in the slammer for up to 5 years. So, Robert, you're hearing all of this and more to the Manafort situation. Your thoughts?
On the Manafort situation, we have yet to hear about 3 remaining of the 8 counts, but it looks like 5 guilty verdicts. I'm imagining the other 3 are likely to be guilty as well. Who knows? But
right.
we'll find out. And he was found guilty with regard to the tax charges. There wasn't much of a defense with regard to that. You know, you file your own tax returns. You know what you filed. You sign them. I suspect that the jury probably did have some trouble with some things related to the bank fraud charges.
Yeah, these are weighty financial issues. Peter Ducey, you have
a little more complicated.
Absolutely. Or Peter Ducey, you have more for us.
And on those 3 outstanding verdicts, Paul Manafort has been found guilty as well. So on the 8 charges out of 18 that the Manafort jury said that they could come to unanimous verdicts on, they have found Paul Manafort guilty on all of them. The first 5 guilty that we got were all relating to falsely filed tax returns. These 3 have to do with a failure to file a foreign bank account report, bank fraud in getting a $3.5 million loan from Citizens Bank, and bank fraud in getting a $1 million loan from the Bank of California. So we still do not know what the judge wants to do with these 10 charges that the jury could not come to a unanimous verdict on, but they are 8 for 8 in guilty against Paul Manafort, and two of these 3 that just came in carry a maximum prison sentence of 30 years apiece. The first 5 carry maximum prison sentences of 3 years each, so that would be 15. One of them carries 5, so that gets to 20, and then 2 30-year sentences, so we are up to 80 years maximum in prison, if my mental math is correct here, Neil.
I trust your mental math. Robert Ray, if that's the case, Paul Manafort is looking at spending the rest of his life behind bars.
Well, it will be a lot of time because the numbers are so high. I mean, he's not going to get an 80-year sentence either. That's the maximum possible sentence under the statute.
Anything could mitigate this cooperation?
Well, it could. I mean, he certainly could decide. The government could choose to, to entertain the value of his cooperation post-verdict. And then you ask the question about what's going to happen as the judge decides now what to do about the remaining 10 counts. My guess is he'll probably ask the jury, I've accepted your partial verdict. Do you think that there's any fruitful reason for you to continue to deliberate with regard to the other 10? I suspect the answer to that is likely to be no, and in that event, he will declare a mistrial as to those counts and discharge the jury, and that will then leave the decision in the hands back with Bob Mueller to decide whether or not those 10 remaining counts will be retried in a separate proceeding.
All right, let's go back to Peter Ducey. This is on the Paul Manafort, the former campaign manager for Donald Trump, who's facing a lot of time behind bars right now. You got more details, Peter?
We now know that there has been a mistrial declared in the 10 counts against Paul Manafort that the jury said they could not come to a unanimous conclusion about. So out of 18 charges, they came back with 8 guilty verdicts, and then the other 10, they were so stuck that the judge has now declared a mistrial. So the information is coming from our team just as quickly as we can possibly get it out. But again, no electronic devices inside the courtroom, and so it is really just a foot race between representatives of all the networks who have people upstairs on the 9th floor and also in an overflow courtroom because of all the interest on the 6th floor here in Alexandria. So as we get some more, we will wait. But again, 8 guilty verdicts against Paul Manafort and 10 mistrials on the other 10 counts. Neil.
All right, Peter, just to update those guilty verdicts, count 1, subscribing to false United States individual tax returns, as Robert was saying. That could be a weighty matter, and it was pretty easy to prove. They apparently, to the jury's satisfaction, did. Subscribing to false U.S. individual tax returns at a second count. Subscribing to false individual tax returns and follow-up tax returns. But reading through these, are a lot of them tax financial related.
Right. Well, and so that would make sense. You have to sign the return. You presumably know what it is you signed. There's not much of a defense to say I didn't know. And he had unreported income, which is the subject of the other count about failure to register as a foreign agent, and the fact that he had overseas bank accounts. So I think that's sort of the gravamen of the essence of the government's case. I don't remember or recall exactly what the subject matter is with the remaining 10 counts where the jury was unable to reach a verdict. Although I do, think that there was a significant defense raised, at least with a portion of those charges, about exactly what the government could prove as to what Paul Manafort himself knew. Yeah,
but you were all over this early on that they would be tax and tax related. For the that I mentioned
yes.
are tax related. Then foreign bank and financial accounts that were misreported or failed to report. So
right.
Again, financial transactions.
So when you think about it, Neil, I mean, what's the defense to that? I mean, you either if you have foreign bank accounts,
an accountant.
Right? Well, you can try, but I mean, it's in if you're the nominee and you have the foreign bank accounts and you don't register them, there's really not much of a defense to say, well, you didn't know.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. By the way, the president was apparently asked about both the Cohen and Manafort situations as he was getting ready to leave for West Virginia for this political event tonight. Photographers were trying to address this with him. He had very little to say. He ignored shouted questions on this as the motorcade came with a camera view, just as the Manafort situation was announced. There is supposed to be a gaggle on the plane, but again, we just don't know at this point, or no reaction formally from the president. He'll be in West Virginia for a campaign event. All right, Peter Ducey has more information for us now. Again, this is focusing on the Paul Manafort situation. What do you have, Peter?
Neil, we're told that the jury has now been dismissed. As of just a few minutes ago, the jury was sent home, thanked for their service, and they all asked the judge to please keep their names confidential. Remember, a few days ago, a handful of news organizations, including the New York Times, AP, CNN, filed a motion to intervene in the case because they wanted the names of the jury, among other things in this trial, unsealed before the verdicts, and the judge said there had been threats against him. He didn't see why there wouldn't be threats against jurors if their names were released. So he said at the time he was not inclined to unseal the names, and the jurors just asked that the names not ever come out, and they're now on their way home. Neil?
All right. That's not unusual, right? People like to maintain their anonymity and...
Sure, and all of this is what you would have expected. The jury was unable to reach a verdict on those 10 counts. The judge had no choice but to declare a mistrial and discharged the jury and sent them home. Bob Mueller's office will have to decide whether to retry those 10 counts. I think it's probably, I want to speak for his office, but it's probably likely that will not be done. It will not result in a retrial. And they're facing another proceeding against Mr. Manafort in the District of Columbia in October in any event. So my guess is that we've now heard from this jury, and that's the end of the matter, at least as far as the proceeding in Virginia.
Days ago, you said that this was something that was much, not necessarily easier to prove, but it was much more black and white on financial related matters. It turns out that 14 of the 18 counts dealt with financial, sometimes weighty financial issues, but they were fairly black and white: tax and financial disclosure statements, banking transactions, foreign.
And the prosecutor's closing argument, which essentially was the star witness in this case would be the documents, that certainly was true with regard to the counts that the jury ultimately was able to reach a verdict of guilty.
But wasn't that the case that originally Bob Mueller was building, financial, follow the money?
Yes. The question is, does
What does this mean now?
does it lead anywhere? I mean, that is the question, isn't it? Does it have anything to do, and will it lead to the development of further evidence in connection with the investigation related to the core mandate, which is collusion? So far, it seems to be the answer to that question is no, but we don't know for
There's
certain.
no collusion here. There's just some financial hanky-panky, right?
Right, correct. And what Rudy Giuliani said today about the Michael Cohen case is true. I mean, to the extent that it is accurately reported that Michael Cohen had nothing to say about Donald Trump's knowledge beforehand during the campaign, the fact that Michael Cohen is in trouble and pleads guilty to an offense, a campaign finance violation, really says nothing about the campaign or the president himself. So, I mean, I think that's why you can quite accurately can conclude from at least what